Today we're going to construct something called a biquad antenna. Now this is a directional antenna that should yield anywhere from 5 to 8 decibels of gain. If you notice behind me, I've got a satellite dish. You can mount the biquad antenna on the end of the dish arm here, which we'll do that in another segment, and we can get significant more gain. But on to the primary topic, biquad antenna. The biquad antenna, it constructs of a rear metal plate of some sort that is going to be used as a reflector. And then we have this double diamond driven element, which I call the bow tie element, which is going to actually actively receive antenna signals, radio signals. The back plate to this will be one wavelength. So in this case, it's close to 5 inches, 4.9 inches or something like that. It really doesn't matter if you go over the actual, as long as you're not below one wavelength. Each side of this is going to be quarter wavelength. So each one of these is quarter, so we have a wavelength on each side. The distance between the reflector and the driven element will be 1/8 wavelength. So in this case, it's about 13 millimeters here. Each one of these is about 31.5 millimeters. Now, creating this, there are a couple of ways of doing it, and there are instructions on the internet. One common way, which I'll put a link to of a video on the show notes, is using a copper PCB board. You drill a hole through the center. If you notice, I've got some nice silver marks here, so I can actually get nice 90-degree angles, so I know exactly where my dead center is. And I used a through-hole panel mount to affix the panel mount end connector. Now, you take a PCB and you drill through it, and you get a copper pipe, and you feed that. You solder the copper pipe through the hole. The copper pipe acts as the actual separator, and then you solder everything together. But the problem is, 1, PCBs are expensive. 2, you take a blowtorch to a PCB, you run the risk of heat expansion, breaking the copper away from the actual board. It's happened to me a couple of times. It's a very expensive mistake, not something you want to go through repeatedly. Getting the actual copper tubing, all you need is about 2 inches or less, but they only come in lengths of at least 8 feet. So copper is actually an expensive material on the market nowadays. I don't feel like spending $30 for a 10-foot length of copper when I only need 2 or 3 inches. The third thing is the actual crimpers. They're expensive. Not everyone wants to go out and spend $80 on crimpers. So although the antenna is solid as all hell, minus 1 point, the driven element, the double diamond biquad element, this is really flimsy. All of my antenna designs, this antenna has easily broken off every single time. How can we create a way of creating a biquad antenna that is easy to obtain the components for, easy to obtain the materials for, and doesn't break the bank when we make it? So today, I'm going to show you how to make a biquad antenna out of an old CD spindle, some aluminum tape, a little bit of 20 or 22 gauge copper wire, and a 4-hole panel mount connector, end connector. And of course, we got a couple of nuts, bolts, and other various things, common tools, soldering iron, and all that stuff. So we're going to get to the table side, and I'm going to get to the beginning of creating this kick-ass antenna. Okay, here's our table of crap. Soldering iron, typical tools, screwdriver, Sharpie marker, desoldering braid, solder, panel mount end connector, 4-hole variety. You can use the 2-hole substitution. I would recommend the 4-hole. The through-hole will not work. Aluminum tape, relatively inexpensive. You can get it at most hardware stores. This is used for heating and air conditioning in central air conditioner ducts. We'll need some kind of utility knife, razor blade, or X-Acto knife. Screws. You can use screws, nuts, or bolts. It really doesn't matter. This is to actually affix the connector to our CD spindle. A 25 pack would be the best, or a 10 pack, but they are kind of hard to find. You can use something else, but then you're going to have this really huge, muffin cake pan top, as they're called, or a cake pan top sticking out of the top. Okay, righto. So I cut off the spindle, and I use the a utility knife, just a box cutter, to kind of just scrape it away so it's nice and fresh. And then I take the panel mount and I stick it in like so, and I lined it up, and I drilled a couple of holes through it. Now what I'm going to do is the connector can actually fit through like so, and it just so happens that standard PC screws will thread into the actual connector quite nicely. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I take some of this tape and I'm going to line the tape over the top of it, and I'm going to get a nice even coat of aluminum tape. Keeping in mind this is actual metal. If you want to actually go the extra mile, you can actually take sheet metal, like I've explained before. Sheet metal is easily procured from old cookie tins from the holidays. A lot of times it's covered in paint or lacquer, so just do something to get rid of the paint, wire wheel brush or some sandpaper or whatever, get it nice, fresh, uncovered metal. So I'm going to go ahead off camera because this is going to be kind of boring, and I'm going to go ahead and cover this in aluminum tape. Here we go, not too difficult. Went ahead and lined the entire thing with foil tape. I used the ridge over here as a guide. I just took my utility knife, scored around the side to peel off all the extra. You don't have to worry too much about getting wrinkles and such in the foil. Just try not to have excessive amounts of bubbles and boils and such. And then I'm going to go ahead and just fit this on. I'm going to feed the screws through the front of this through the holes that I've pre-drilled. I've got three of the four screws, or I guess they're screws. If you need to use nuts and bolts, that is just fine. If you get any tears, we've got a lot of light in here so it's reflective. If you get any tears, it shouldn't be too big deal if you get tears in the aluminum foil, but if you really got a bad tear, you can go ahead and put some tape over it just to cover it up. Now, I've got this component. It's called a ring connector. These are usually found in automotive applications. It's actually very common in household to find. And this is going to be the way we're going to attach the driven element to the shield. Because the problem is, with aluminum, you can't solder it onto it. And you can't solder onto tape either. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, like so, and I'm just going to bend this back at 90 degrees. Just like that. And this is going to sit right here, as close as possible, but without touching. So readjust it if need be, and I'm going to go ahead and screw this on. Lo and behold, let's see if I can get a nice close-up shot of this. There it is. Affixed quite nicely, not touching the signal, and well grounded. So that's the reflector part. If you have any kind of sheet metal that you're going to be soldering onto, I'd highly recommend solder on either bolt on a ring connector, screw on a ring connector, or solder your wire to this first, because if you're using a CD spindle and you're using any kind of blowtorch or soldering gun or soldering iron for an excessively long amount of time, remember, this is plastic. It's going to melt. So, we're going to go ahead to the clamp side. Actually, no, before we go to the clamp side, we need to make the bow tie. 20 gauge copper wire. I actually got a meat skewer here, and I marked 2 points on it. This point here, right here, that is, I do believe, 16 millimeters or 15 millimeters, 1/8 wavelength of center frequency. This is half wave, half wavelength of center frequency. And what I'm going to use this for is a mark. What I need to do is I need to make the bow tie element by creating successive 90-degree angle bends. And instead of taking a ruler time and time again, I'm just going to use this as a little mark and bend. Okay, there's our 90 degree. We're going to go in with the pliers and make a nice 90-degree angle bend. Just like that. And then we're going to measure it in again. 90 degree. Right about there. 90 degree. Just like so. There's another one. And we're going to make another one. Where are we? Make another 90 degree here. Would be a good idea to take some kind of 90 degree angle straight edge of sorts and make sure you have, in fact, 90 degree angle. So I'm going to go ahead and off camera, I'm going to finish this. This next one would be 90 degrees bent this way. I'll just go ahead and do it. If you're off like a half a millimeter or a millimeter or so, it's no big deal. It's practically impossible for us to get that precise. There is another bend. Then we're going to get another bend. Okay. Go ahead and made all of the bends. I've corrected them and such. And I've left an excessive amount of wire sticking off the ass end. This is actually what's going to be one of the two leads. We also have to solder a lead to this side as well. One on this side, one on this side. And I'll go to the clamp side now, and we're going to go ahead and solder all of this together and get it spaced off of the reflector. Typical 30-watt soldering iron, typical solder, nothing special. Have a small surplus piece of copper. I'm going to solder this coming straight out of the top here, and you'll see why in one moment. Fill the solder cup up with solder. Do not use your bare hands when dealing with any of this wire. It will heat up very quickly and it will burn like a son of a bitch. Be forewarned. As usual, when soldering, be very careful that this center conductor over here, this white material around the center of this thing, that's actually polypropylene or high impact polystyrene. Either way, it does not react well to heat, so do not heat it up excessively. Now, I've got that meat skewer that I've marked right here. This mark is the 1/8 wavelength. And this wire, this center wire, the entire bow tie needs to be that far away from the center. Or sorry, away from the reflector. So, using this as a guide, I'm going to mark that, and I'm going to cut it. Now on the bow tie itself, this actual rounded edge right here, not the edge that has the two pieces taken apart, this rounded edge needs to be soldered to just that. Now I'm also going to take my my meat skewer or whatever else. I mean, this is just a convenience thing. You don't have to do it this way. I'm going to mark slightly longer than the actual wavelength because you can't cut something to be longer. You can only cut it to be shorter. So this is going to have to fit into that center conductor, or sorry, into the shield, and this is going to fit to the center conductor. So what I have to do is keep trimming this away until it fits. This is pretty much just luck of the draw now. There we go, that should be okay. Another cool thing about using this this ring connector over here is if you cut the leg too short, you have a lot of forgiveness and play because of this actual solder cup that they have here. Now technically this is a crimp-on connector, but if you don't tell, I won't tell. I'm going to go ahead and try to fill this up with some solder. And we're going to go ahead and feed this in. Cool down too quick. You might need to use a soldering gun on this because it is a relatively thick piece of wire. The actual ring connector itself. There we go. Now we're going to pre-tin the signal wire. And we're going to pre-tin the bend in the actual element. And then we're going to bring these two together, tack them on. Then we're going to take this, and we're going to pre-tin both sides of that, and we're going to tack those on. And from this point, your biquad's built. However, I would actually sit there and try to readjust all of the elements very gently, and then using the meat skewer yet again, you can easily just go along this track and see where you have a low point and readjust, making sure that you're 1/8 wavelength apart from the reflector. This side's a little low. There you go. Biquad's built. Now what we got to do is go to the computer side, and well, now that I look at it, the elements are a little mangled. I'm going to go ahead off camera, and I'm going to try to clean them up a bit. That's going to be a boring process, and I'm going to go to NetStumbler and see how this thing performs. Alright, it's not the prettiest thing I've ever made, but with a can of matte black spray paint, wouldn't look too bad. Check out the show notes. I'll put some links to my Picasso page where I've actually made a really nice looking biquad with a portable tripod. This is just a little desktop camera tripod with a 90-degree angle bracket, so that way I can actually stand the thing up. Got NetStumbler going. Let's see what NetStumbler says about this antenna. There we go. Not too shabby, huh? From the typical internal antenna to the biquad. Now look at all these access points. Now if I actually take the biquad and pan around, you'll see a whole bunch more access points start popping up. Now like I said, the biquad will give you anywhere from 6 to 8 decibels of gain, so that's almost double, if not 1.5 times your actual signal strength. Every 3 decibels. Now, I don't think I've explained decibels. And why is NetStumbler in the negatives? NetStumbler is measuring loss between your access point, free air, to your computer, or to your receiver. And it's measured in negative decibel gain, meaning that's how many decibels you're losing. Ideally, 0 decibels mean no loss whatsoever. So by having a 0 decibel, which means you have 100% signal, you're losing nothing. Now right now, this antenna is actually should be giving us 6 decibels of gain. Every 3 decibels, you double your signal quality. You double your power. So this is giving us anywhere from 6 to 8, so it's either triple or better than a typical antenna. And as you saw with the internal antenna on the computer, we're getting 90 decibels of loss. With this antenna, we're getting about 70. And if I actually position the antenna to where the access point is, being a directional antenna, you can actually pinpoint where the access point's actually located, or a rough idea. So if we were to actually go through NetStumbler, let's go to DayZ05. Anything there? Nope. How about Big Daddy? Okay, Big Daddy must be pointing where? Honestly, I have no idea. There should be a couple of Linksys. Here we go, Linksys. I know one of these Linksys is actually pointed way up there. Which one, I don't remember. I think it's this one. Now keeping in mind that I'm inside my house right now that's completely made out of brick, and the walls are actually lined with a wire mesh because of the construction age. We use like stucco and all that crap on the walls and such. So right now this antenna is actually performing quite admirably, even though it's just half-assed. It's just some wire, a connector, some screws, an old CD spindle. Oh, and if you wanted to see what this would actually look like, here's a 50-pack. Come on. Yeah, that's what it would look like with a 50-pack. So if you can get your hands on a 25-pack or such, great. Now, I have figured out a way to cut down the CD spindles. You take some masking tape, some actual, or painter's tape, and you take a mathematical compass, like I've been using in a lot of the antenna segments to measure the actual diameter and lengths of things in metric. And you scribe a circle all the way around, and using a hacksaw or another tool, you cut it. But these tops are tapered, meaning it's a smaller diameter at the top than it is at the bottom. So, if you cut this, it's not going to fit around the actual grooves of the CD spindle. You'll have to take a heat gun. A hair dryer will not work, I've tried. Use a heat gun, or put the thing inside of a toaster oven for a little while, soften up the plastic, go and get some glue, put the glue around the edge of the actual CD spindle and wedge the thing on and clamp it there. You'll have to take something and clamp the top and the bottom. Again, look at my Picasso page. I'll link to it on the forums as well as the show notes, and I'll show you what that looks like in the after process. So this is a biquad antenna. To tell you the truth, it's my favorite of all antennas so far. It's better than a waveguide, better than a compact collinear, better than a Yagi. It's small, it's portable, offers a bit of gain, and when you got a satellite dish and you put it at the end of the arm, the gain is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to end this segment here, so have some fun. If you have any questions or comments, IRC, you should already have the address. It's on our homepage. It's also on the website. You can all go through. You can IRC through the website. Check out the show notes that are on the forums, or contact me through the forums. All right, everyone, don't steal Wi-Fi, especially mine.